So they started pulling me up, and there was a guy by the name of Bob Sully, buck sergeant, about 6'4", was standing there, and when they were pulling me up through the trees, I was going through the limbs, and I lost my pistol, I lost my camera, and I lost a couple other things because I was trying to not. I didn't want to get tangled in the tree, and then I didn't want to get killed by pulling through a big limb. So I was pretty busy coming out. But as soon as I got up the top, I could see this master sergeant. I didn't get to meet the guy, but I talked to him later on the phone. I said, I saw you up there with your hand on the guillotine. The guillotine is a big cable cutter that they could cut the cable and drop me if the helicopter started taking battle damage, or they're not going to sacrifice 4 or 5 guys to get one out. So I said, I saw you up there with your hand on that guillotine, and he was laughing at me. But they pulled me up to the helicopter, and this big Sergeant Sully grabbed the winch and pulled it in. He said, pull me into the chopper, and he said, quick, get in, jump on the flak vest and get in the back and sit on the flak vest. They were using the flak vest as armor. Yep. So I said, okay, and I did that, and I have since become good friends with Sergeant Sully. He retired a Chief Master Sergeant, and he's really a great guy. He's been here in my home, and I met 3 or 4 of those guys that were involved in my rescue. But I got in the back of the helicopter, and I started taking inventory. I was bleeding. My head was bleeding. My nose was bleeding, but I didn't have anything broken, and I felt that was a pretty good ride. So they took me back to Nakhon Phanom, Thailand, where these guys were stationed. And as fate would have it, the helicopter was met by a couple of general officers, Colonel Patello, who was a very famous full colonel. I had met him before. He was stationed at Nakhon Phanom, because I was exactly the 1,500th aircrew to be rescued by the Air Rescue Service in Southeast Asia. I was a hero to those guys. And newsreels and everything, and I have wonderful pictures that they were taking over there. That thing happened, and so I didn't sleep much that night, and there was a C-130 going to take me back to Tuiwa the next morning, and I got in that airplane, and a radio guy comes back and says, Major, would you like to talk to your wife on the telephone? I said, sure, get her on the phone for me. So he patched to that airplane, to Saigon, to Guam, to Scottsdale, Arizona, to Senator Barry Goldwater, who was what do you call those guys, a ham operator.
That's right.
I was talking to Senator Barry Goldwater. I later became his pilot on a couple of missions. But he passed to Senator Barry Goldwater, to my wife Peggy in Lubbock, Texas. And I'd say something over, and then this guy says over, this guy says over, Goldwater says over, and then my wife says, how are you, over, and then, this went on for a long time, but that's how that happened. And I got back to Tuiwa, and since it was my last mission program, I told my boss that I didn't want to get shot down on my last mission. That's terrible morale factor. Everybody worries about getting shot down on their first mission or their last one. I said, when somebody does get shot down on the last one, it tells everybody else that it can happen to them too. So I said, give me one more mission. So the wing commander called General Brown at 7th Air Force at Saigon. He just happened to be in the command post, and he said, this major wants to fly one more mission. And General Brown says, okay, he can fly one more mission, but keep him in country. Don't let him go to Laos or Cambodia. And I flew one more mission, and that was on the 21st of December, 1968, and I walked in my house in Lubbock, Texas on Christmas Eve, 3 days later in Lubbock, Texas. And I knew I'd made the right decision about not walking out of there. But after that, you know, I was tired. I was mentally tired. I was physically tired. I flew 54 missions with 4 air controllers. And we were shot up once on that mission. I was flying in the back seat of this little wind-up airplane, and with a buddy of mine, and we were flying. I had a pistol, but no other weapon, and he had an AK-47 or an AR-15, I think, in the front. But we're flying across this rice paddy, and there's a Viet Cong soldier, an NVA soldier in uniform, walking across this rice paddy all by himself. He had a rifle. I said, okay, fly over there, I'll shoot him with my pistol. It was full of tracers. So we flew over there, and I started shooting at this guy, and I could see where the bullets were going because they were tracers, red tracers. And I didn't come within 100 feet of that guy. But he turned around and sat down and started shooting at us, and a bullet says, kazing, went right past my ear, and went into the wing right here, and fuel started pouring all over me, 100-octane fuel. It just so happened that my ballpoint pen was exactly the same size as that bullet hole, and I stuck it in that bullet hole, and I told the guy in the front seat, I said, let's go home. But that was one of 54 missions I flew with 4 air controllers, and we landed out of some little special forces camps, and I traded artifacts with the Mountain Yard guys. I got a crossbow and some stuff, but the food out there was terrible. And see, they had Vietnamese women cooking food in a big black kettle like they did on the frontier 200 years ago, and it smelled terrible. And so when I got back, I got on the radio with some of those guys, and I said, would you like to have some chicken? They said, yeah, we'd like to have some chicken. So on my next mission, coming home on the way to a mission, we had gone down to Cameron Bay and stolen from the Army 25-pound boxes of frozen chicken. I mean, they were about this big. We put them in the speed brakes and raised the speed brakes to hold them there. So when we wanted to drop them onto Special Forces camp, we just fly over there as slow as we could, drop the speed brakes, and it was like dropping a bomb. And they finally called and said, don't do that anymore. It says you're going to kill somebody. And they said, I don't want to write somebody's wife and say your husband was killed by frozen chicken. So we stopped doing that. It was dangerous. But my year over there, and I think I was over there about 348 or 350 days. It was very exciting. I lost 20 pounds. I was working. Seemed like I didn't do anything but work, and I lost weight and didn't know it because we never got out of a flight suit. I was mentally tired. I was physically tired, and I was confused about, looking back on all of it now, how unlikely any of that would happen to this little kid that didn't make terrible grades in high school. And it had a profound effect on my life after that time. And I went back to Lubbock with an assignment to pick up where I'd left off, flying a T-38, teaching pilot training. And I got back to Lubbock, and there was a full colonel of DO. He didn't much like me because he resented the fact that I got a Silver Star and a Bronze Star and 3 DFCs and 16 air medals and a Purple Heart, and this guy had a good conduct medal from the Army. and I heard that through the wife grapevine later, and so, but he had power, life, and death over me. He took me out of the T-30 and put it in a T-37, which is a pretty good airplane, but you know, you don't want to get in a Volkswagen after you've been driving a Rolls Royce. But they put me in a T-37, and it broke my heart, broke my spirit. I busted a stand check. They promoted me to LC, and I said, that meant a desk job, probably the Pentagon, and I said, I don't want no part of this. And so I turned down the promotion and got out. If I'd accepted the promotion, that would have meant 2 more years before I could retire. And that was I think I could retire. I could retire in 2 years. I could retire in less than, I don't remember. But anyway, I didn't want to accept the promotion. And all my buddies couldn't believe it. I mean, nobody ever turned down a promotion to LC. But I had a little business going in my garage. I was casting bronzes, art bronzes, and I was doing pretty good with that. And but you know, if I have to flip burgers someplace, I'll do that, because I didn't want to. I'd never had a job, except being a general's aide, that I had to wear anything but a flight suit. I always had a flying job, and wonderful assignments, wonderful people, and the airplane that I jumped out of in Laos was an F-100D that belonged to the 188th in Albuquerque. That they called themselves the Enchilada Air Force.
Tacos?
Tacos.
Tacos, yeah.
It was one of their airplanes that I jumped out of, and the chief of maintenance told me later he was glad I jumped out of it because it was a hangar plane. They couldn't keep it flying anyway. But that also, and I retired from the Air Force on the 30th of September, 1970. You have to serve 20 years, but you have to retire at the end of the month. So that cost me 26 days extra. And I retired with the most I ever made on active duty, I think, was $1,000 a month. And that included $150 combat pay and $150 a month flight pay. So they didn't pay us too good, but you know, hamburgers were 20 cents or whatever, and so we lived a pretty good life. And my wife and I figured that we could make it somehow on $1,000 a month retired pay, and that's what I ended up with. But now, you know, I've had all these COLAs over the years. I'm making about $2,600 a month retired pay, which is 3 times what I ever made on active duty. But the Air Force was good to me, and here's a kid that didn't know anything, had almost no motivation, but I joined as a private, and then when I got the day I reached Bitburg Air Force Base, I got there in the morning. I was a first lieutenant in a fighter day squadron that was going fighter bomber, over the shoulder nuclear weapon delivery. They took me down to supply, and I checked out an atomic bomb, Mark 7 atomic bomb, and it was on a dolly. You know, it was about this big around on a dolly, and it had a crew chief, just like an airplane has a crew chief. But the bomb couldn't move, the dolly couldn't move unless I was standing there supervising. So, you know, I started growing up in those days. Here's a kid that doesn't know anything. They gave me a responsibility. They gave me authority, and it started growing on me. And I recommend today that I would like to go back to compulsory military training, particularly with all these kids that are getting in trouble today. You know, we got to turn something around. We got to learn to start leaving people alone in this world, in this country. But I made a note here when you can note. When I was in Vietnam, and I have extensive scrapbooks. Every mission I flew, I wrote an entire page about it as soon as I finished debriefing. Everybody I went with, what I carried, takeoff times, forward air controls, where I refueled, and my notes say that I dropped 196 cans of napalm, 406 750-pound bombs, 492 500-pound bombs, 8 1,000-pound bombs, and I flew 28 missions with rockets. And there were CPU 34s and CPU 32s and other things too. And each mission you had 600 rounds of high explosive incendiary 20-meter bullets. And that was the best weapon we had. Really, the guns were the best weapon. And we didn't use the guns on every mission, but we used the guns I probably fired all my 600 rounds on 80%. We always wanted to save a few of them in case Tuiwa was being attacked when we came home. Something to use to get home. So we didn't just fire them indiscriminately, but I think I'm running out of words.
With the tie-in with the tacos, it's I can guarantee you're going to have a big crowd there, because we chum around with a lot of the Air National Guard guys.
And every one of those guys in Albuquerque were a good bunch of people.
Well, yesterday I was riding around with one of those pilots.
What?
Yesterday I was riding around. We went out to Moriarty Airport, and he was one of those pilots in the Air National Guard from Albuquerque.
Well, when I retired, 2 years later, I moved to Santa Fe and built an art gallery and started making a few bucks, and I bought myself a T-28, a Navy version T-28 with a tail hook, and I had a 112 turbocharged Rockwell Commander made by North American Aviation, and I used to get in that thing and fly down to Albuquerque and pull in the restricted area where the National Guard was down there. They got a little bit excited about that. Fenn, the times have changed since you were in the Air Force. You can't drive your private airplane into this restricted area. But I kept doing it, and nobody ever turned me in anyway. I'd go in and have coffee with those guys and then come home.
Well, we're just so proud that you've given us this interview, because I think we'll probably get all of the tacos that are still alive to come to your presentation.
Well, I hope so. Tell those guys I said, hey.
Will do. Well, sir, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
And it's
good to see you.